G'day, Anthony James here for The Regeneration, your ad-free, freely available, listener-supported podcast, exploring how people are regenerating the systems and stories we live by. I've come to Walyalup, Fremantle this morning at the mouth of Derbil Yerrigan Swan River in WA because Tim Winton's in town to launch his new book. Tim's awards would fill a book themselves now. He's regarded by many as the preeminent Australian writer of his generation, and he's come to town today to launch his first picture book in more than 20 years, and the first non-fiction picture book for children about Ningaloo Reef, the World Heritage Treasure 1,000 kilometres and some north of us here. It's called Ningaloo, Australia's Wild Wonder, spectacularly illustrated by award-winning Perth local Cindy Lane. And as it happens, it launches at the best and worst of times up at the reef. Let's head into the legendary local independent publisher, Fremantle Press, for a chat about it all.
Have you ever met, did you meet him?
Oh, I think we've met before. G'day, Tim. How are you, mate? Nice to see you. Yeah, I think we met at another book launch, actually. And then our chats have been, you were in Sydney for Breath,
you're in a
first time.
Somewhere.
That's right, yeah, in bloody, by Sundry Riverbed, heading up your way.
Right.
And then the next time was just online. But yeah, great to see you, mate. So, back doing your favourite thing, media and events. How's it feel? Launching a new book? Yeah. I always appreciate talking to you, mate. So
I think it's not at all.
It's terrific to have the time.
Taking the interest.
All right, mate. So we're here because you're launching your new book, Ningaloo, Australia's Wild Wonder. Well done. I'm really happy to see it. It looks awesome. It's different though, huh? You haven't done a kid's picture book, the publisher tells me, for over 20 years. And nor has there been a non-fiction kid's picture book from Ningaloo ever, from what I understand. So how did this come about?
I'm just trying to figure that out myself. How did it come to this? I don't know. I think we've been studying Ningaloo and visiting Ningaloo and advocating for it for, 25 years, 30 years. And I've done a lot of stuff in different spaces, whether that's public advocacy. I've written speeches, I've written essays, I've written fiction, with Juice, which is essentially a very bleak nightmare vision of what Ningaloo could look like if we lose the battle and abrogate our responsibilities. And I've written 3 parts of a television series, on the natural history for the ABC. So I guess it's this is a new space in the sense that it's for young people specifically, and so I guess we've amassed a lot of knowledge and a lot of information and a lot of experience about Ningaloo, and it seemed that the best place to take that stuff was to the young, given that they're going to be the custodians of the place. And also I have spent a lot of time trying to convince old people in power to change their thinking, and not without some success, but you are up against the educations that they've had and the mindset that they've grown up with, and their attitudes, which are essentially, exploitative and extractive. And so in the end, I just thought, well, it's probably smart to take this information to young people and be a part of their education and their formation, and to arm them with the natural history, the data, and the social history of the place. So to show them the wonders of Ningaloo and its 3 ecosystems, but also to show them that this stuff doesn't stand in isolation, that the fact that it's intact now is no accident, that this is the result of ordinary people's efforts to change government policy, to change the culture, and to essentially save the place, which is what happened. And I think in some publishing settings, you'd be under pressure to just stick to the quote-unquote facts, but the facts about what animals are there and how the animals relate to the ecosystem and how the ecosystems relate to one another, that's not all the facts. I mean, the facts include how this thing came to be in a geological sense, but also how it came, it comes to still exist, and that's a social reality that is too easily overlooked or somehow erased from the picture. So I think it's about acknowledging the wonder and the miraculous nature of what's there, and to inspire young people with a sense of awe and excitement, but for them to also get enough sense of empowerment where they can do something similar in their world and in their future. Ningaloo is the one place where we got things right, by and large, compared to, for instance, in the northwest of Western Australia, it's the exception to the rule. The rule is complete exploitation, development, and landscapes that are completely unrecognisable, and we're seeing that being played out, now at Murajuga, where you have some of the social and natural wonders of the world having to coexist, with really destructive industrial activities. So we should celebrate Ningaloo for its exceptionality and show kids that this is what can happen when people get together and defend a place and have a different ethic about custodianship and a shared sense of responsibility to a place.
I'd love to come back to a few of those threads, Tim, though immediately I'm filled with curiosity. Even just the documentary project that you alluded to a couple of years ago when we last spoke, that when we spoke had almost killed you. Out of your comfort zone, various things happen, you end up with multiple roles, and you pull off an extraordinary thing, but it took a toll, it's fair to say. I'm wondering, a project like this, does it have the opposite effect, or is it still a production thing that takes its toll, or was this a bit of a different beast?
It's a shorter project, so the toll is different, and it's all work, it's all labour, but it's probably a kinder process.
You'd like to think so.
Yeah, and it's I think it's a way of getting our revs in.
Yeah, that's right. Donuts in Frio. That's why we're inside.
No, I think it's a fresh look at the same issue, and I think it's when you can put beauty back in the frame, and that's where Cindy's artwork comes in. So I'm trying to arm the book and the reader with the facts, with natural history and social history, but really it has to be beautiful, and I think that's Cindy was the right person, and her practice is really interesting. She's a watercolorist. She makes sure that when she's painting mangroves, she uses mangrove water in the mix, and when she's doing the stuff on the reef, she's using seawater.
No way.
So that's just part of her practice, and it brings a kind of an organic element of connectedness and respect. So beauty is important. I think we overlook that at our peril, and so we're both artists. And even though I've been like a long-term activist, there's no point in hectoring people, whether they're young or they're old, because they switch off. And if you can't put something beautiful in front of people to inspire them, you've already lost half the battle. So I guess my position, as a grandfather of 6, is that the world is a miracle. And we need to be reminding ourselves and making that knowledge, that miraculousness, available to young people to show them how exceptional not just Ningaloo is, but our existence as a species. This is really important, and I think we overlook that, and that makes us poorer. And I think we are subject to our own anguish and our own anxiety, particularly around climate and biodiversity loss, and there are many things to mourn, but I think we become poorer and weaker and are less armed for the struggle if we forget about wonder and the miraculousness of existence.
a note tonight at the launch that Fiona Stanley will be helping to launch it. How did that come about?
I asked if she might be interested. I know that Fiona as a senior, not just a public person, but a medical practitioner. She's in the space of children's health. She's vitally concerned about the future of the planet and the future of young people and the health of young people, particularly with climate. She's also, been a long-time supporter of Protect Ningaloo, the campaign that we've been inventing and then running and supporting for all these years. So it seemed like a good fit. It's Perth. She's an establishment figure, but not your usual Perth establishment figure in the sense of she's not. Fiona doesn't see herself in the role of perpetually defending the status quo. And in Perth, in the media and in politics, most people are invested in defending the status quo, which usually means vested political and corporate interests. And Fiona's a standout in that sense, which is probably what makes her a little bit spiky and unpopular in certain parts of Perth culture.
Yeah, it occurs to me that her front row seat to kids and their worsening health since she founded the Kids Institute in 1990.
Yep.
And still ongoing, and mental, emotional as much as physical, and how they all tie in. Yep. Her front row seat to that. You mentioned being a granddad before. When I see her and when I listen to her speak, that's what I feel. I feel that she's charged by that and, in a sense, representing that. And to see her at the launch, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, it's skin in the game, isn't it?
Bang.
And I think if you've lived long enough and you've seen things at work long enough, and you can see the trends and the impoverishment of our young people in terms of health and mental health in the midst of our really unbelievable prosperity.
Oh.
Just the mix of those, So look, I think I'm really grateful that Fiona's going to launch the book, and I think it's a good mix.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm looking forward to it. All right, I want to tie back in some threads to where we started, and as much because when I was coming down, I'm thinking about Juice being your previous book and this, and how distinct they are, and then coming back from overseas only recently and keeping tabs and hearing the news about the declaration of the marine park in Ningaloo, but then also the mass bleaching. This best and worst of times thing, I sort of see placed on everything. But I'm wondering, from your point of view, can you tell us a bit about, as you've been up there and working at all this, what the state is with that new marine park? What does it mean? And then on the flip side, how the reef is looking. Yeah,
so obviously it's terrific news that the West Australian government has committed formally to giving Exmouth Gulf, the entirety of Exmouth Gulf Marine Park status, because that was our position and that was what we've been advocating for 10 years. And that 30% of the Gulf would be, given over to sanctuary status, which is, really important. So for those of us who've been fighting that fight and trying to convince decision makers to make this step, it's been terrific. It really is progress, because we're essentially trying to, complete unfinished business from the middle of the last decade. Exmouth Gulf should have been part of the Ningaloo World Heritage Area. It was initially listed inside the boundary, but vested interests made sure that it was carved out. And so this is a little bit of justice, this is a little bit of catch-up. It's infuriating that it should have to take so much extra, a decade of extra energy and effort and funding from the community to produce this outcome, but it's a good thing, and I think it's encouraging that at least in this space, the West Australian government has, seen itself free to make the right decision, when so often they can look as if they're constrained by obligations to other interests. And
Well, you mentioned Murujuga before, just declared World Heritage, and extension of gas plant to 2070.
Yeah, so so we're still making progress at Ningaloo in terms of spatial protection, and that's something to celebrate, because you have to celebrate the wins, because they're not always that frequent,
100%. And just for context, for those who aren't aware, listeners who aren't aware, there was, deluge, is that overstating it? But just a lot of industrial pushes, various kinds, that have had to be fended off and worked through to come to this outcome. It is a huge outcome.
Yeah, no, it was huge. 2005, we knocked off the Straits Salt, Yannery Salt proposal. 2017, we had to knock off the Subsea 7 oil and gas pipeline launching facility. Then we, last year knocked off the K+S, the world's biggest salt producer. They had another massive salt facility planned, the size of Sydney. And so to knock those out of the way and then to get the park has been great. What most people won't still realise is that we're still facing the threat of the deep water port, smack dab in the middle of the marine park, which they're still hoping to get up.
How does that work?
At Quailing Pool, which is now going to be a Class A reserve. So that, obviously they still have ambitions to get a little carve out, and we're obviously going to make sure that doesn't happen. But if ever there was a company that couldn't read the room, it would be them. But so it's not to say that we've won the battle there, but we just have to make sure that we get proper protection, and that there's no somehow sweetheart deal. It's not as if that doesn't ever happen in Western Australia.
Well,
that's been a great bunch of results. But in the face of all of that, as you say, we've had to go through the worst bleaching event in Ningaloo's history, and that was very painful. Last year, the beginning of summer, I was part of an expedition to go to Scott Reef, which was a big adventure for us, and I thought it might be fun, but it turned out to be a very bittersweet experience. We travelled 400 kilometres north of Broome. We were closer to the island of Roti in East Timor than we were to the Kimberley by the time we got right out there. And just, huge underwater skyscraper comes to the surface at Scott Reef. It's amazing. And we just, for the moment we jumped in the water, I just knew everything was wrong. It was 36 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew that, we were getting in the water at the top end of a marine heat wave. We knew that all that water is going to come south, because that's part of the Lewin Current. And sure enough, as I drove south from that experience, once we got back to Beagle Bay and drove back down the highway, I felt like I was being chased by a bushfire. Yeah. And that's really what it was. It was an underwater bushfire that came all the way down the coast. And a few weeks later, the Kimberley corals started bleaching. The Rolly shoals, were 90-something% bleached. 30,000 fish died in one fish kill in the Pilbara. And then, Ningaloo just had, its most catastrophic bleaching event a few weeks after that, which is still continuing because the water is cooled, but the problem we have now is that at the end of winter and the beginning of summer, we normally expect water temperatures to be at their absolute coolest, but we'll start next summer with warm to hot water. So we're already going to start from too hot. And, so the bleaching was really an enormous shock to people studying and living there, and people who love the place. You know, it's quite devastating to see it. We don't yet know the extent to which how much we'll recover. You know, and it's mostly the northern part of the reef. Coral Bay South was luckier, but it's still a huge. If ever we needed a wake-up call, and there's been this sense of immunity, a false sense of immunity on the west coast about marine heat waves and coral bleaching, because it's, you know, what happens at the Great Barrier Reef seems to be, oh, that's over there, and poor old Great Barrier Reef. Lucky for us, it's not going to happen because we do have a cold current. But even the cold, you know, Ningaloo current, which comes upward from the south, wasn't enough to cool, you know, this huge underwater bushfire that was just devastating the environment. So it's something that we have to use as a pivot. You know, do we want this to be the future? Because, you know, if we don't take urgent and serious and substantial action now, these kind of marine heat waves will be, if not an annual event, at least, you know, every few years, to the point where no reef can recover. At the moment, we're on track to 3 degrees, just short of 3 degrees heating, which is catastrophic. You know, the world is trying to keep global heating to 1.5 degrees, and we're kind of on track to overshoot that by a long way. And that just means, you know, the death of the world's corals. And if we're okay with that, that's fine. But, you know, it's not just about the coral reefs of the world. You know, I think Australians don't understand that at 2 degrees, 2.7, 2.9, 3 degrees, the whole north of Australia will empty out. We'll have climate refugees from within our borders, let alone from outside our borders. And all those people in the north, you won't be able to live, you know, if it's 55 degrees every day. I know what 50 degrees feels like. It's terrifying. And the idea that it could be like that for weeks at a time, people can't live that way.
Let alone produce food.
No, that's right. And so people will just have to come south, you know, and it's all very well to say you can stop the boats. How are you going to stop the utes? So, you know, it's just going to be people, and the most consequential part of that tragedy will be the dispossession, probably permanent dispossession of First Peoples from country. And, you know, that would be worse than colonisation. If your obligations are to country and you can't physically be there because it doesn't support human life anymore, what species of grief are we looking at?
That's exactly where I wanted to go next, in fact. Knowing that there'd been joint management declared at the reef, and wonderful process and genuine process with First Nations, and your documentary project, of course, featured some profound interactions and finds in the digs in the caves that was so emotional and portrayed in the documentary, so it's well worth seeing for those who haven't seen it. I'm wondering, in a sense, how have the relationships continued to form over the last couple of years, and also how they might be feeling and seeing this from their perspective. Always hard to talk for them, of course, but given you're here with me and I haven't been back for a couple of years, what's your sense of it?
Yeah, I think in terms of a conservation alliance, a mutual effort, this is, you know, quite a special case now. I mean, you know, the Ningaloo's custodians only got native title determination in 2019, so we've been able to, you know, watch this in real time as people came back to country. So, you know, the Ningaloo coast now has joint management. The Duralia Station has been returned to First Peoples for joint management as a conservation park, which is, you know, quite a big addition to the conservation estate. And the declaration of the marine park in Exmouth Gulf as a jointly managed asset is a part of that. I think if it hadn't been for the alliance of conservation interests and science interests and custodians, First Peoples, then it would have been a different process, and I think a less successful process. So that's been a great thing to see, and we didn't, that's not something that we saw 25 years ago when we were, fighting the original Save Ningaloo campaign.
Yeah.
So I see that as a really important evolution and a sign of progress. I think Ningaloo's First Peoples are feeling empowered but embattled, if I can put it that way. I think there are young people coming onto country. There are older senior people who are ailing and getting older, and some are leaving us, and so there's a sense of urgency about things. But I think Ningaloo's custodians have always known that the place is fragile, and their investment in the life of the place is ancient, and ongoing, and they'll keep honouring country come what may, but I think it's a really interesting time to see people coming back on country. There are more digs subsequent. There've been a number of digs subsequent to our TV show, and I've had the privilege of being there for some of that, and that's been a great thing. And you see new, young traditional owners involved in that each time, and that's been a terrific thing. So I think it's part of a good story. So we face challenges, but we need to remember that in order to face the future in terms of climate and biodiversity loss, we need alliances, we need solidarity, we need a sense of possibility, and that's what I was aiming to foster, with this children's book, this sense of, look at the miracle of the world, look how beautiful and holy it is, look what we can do together to keep it alive. And I mean that I don't just mean that in terms of saving these ecosystems and looking about this place, but it's about the broader challenge of keeping the climate to the point where it's making a habitable places over as much of the globe as possible. Life isn't going to be, for my grandchildren's children, it's not going to be what it was for you and me. There's nothing we can do about that. I mean, we've left it very late. We've fudged it and kicked the can down the road. There's a certain level of change for the worse baked in, and we just have to be honest about that. But every action that we take, every percentage of a degree that we take off the sum total means more people get to live better, more species get to survive, more landscapes and landforms get to persist, and that's worth fighting for, because the idea that, okay, it's all too late, there's nothing we can do, that's just reckless. And if you've got too little time left, does that mean you don't want any time? If you can fight for more time, you take that time, and you use it. And I think I saw something written today, if you think that your contribution doesn't make a difference, or that your country's contribution doesn't make a difference, why are we still paying tax? Every time you pay tax, you add to the commonwealth. Every time you avoid tax, like some of our great corporate friends, particularly in the fossil space, you're robbing the rest of the people. If you're okay with robbing people, put your hand up as a thief, that's fine. But if you're pretending that you're contributing when you're actually robbing people, you're a liar, and we'll call you out.
You said before about First Nations folk, they'll honour country, whatever comes. I had in mind what that meant for you even, but you proceeded to tell it. Just, what else are you going to do? Yeah,
and if you've got, all of us have got skin in the game. If you have children or you don't have children, everyone's got friends, everyone's got family, everyone's got neighbours. We're in it together, and we go down together, or we pull up together. And every good thing that's happened in this country, and there are lots of good things that we've achieved in this country, they only came from people pulling together for the common good. And if the common good isn't a good enough excuse, I don't know what is.
And to hear some of those stories, I mean, even the great news out of Ningaloo right now, and Murrayjugga, and there's news coming out of the Kimberley too, as well as the bad stuff. But yeah, it's not like we're starting from scratch with that stuff, with coming together. It's
no, and I think we have to learn, and we have to remember the victories that we've had. In order to keep fighting the fight, you need to remember what we've achieved, and that stuff arms you. And yeah, I'm an old guy who's been around, and we've been a part of a bunch of battles, and I need to remind myself. So it's even more important that we need to introduce young people to the fact that good things have been done and good things can happen, and they'll only happen if we provide good information, we keep our minds open, and we form alliances across boundaries, and we get stuff done together. This is a common effort. It's not the work of individuals, because no one person can save us. No one person is ever going to save us.
Good time for a book that you co-produce with an illustrator in that sense.
Yeah, no, and honestly, it's kind of an antidote to Juice, my previous book. Juice is the nightmare of where we don't do anything, and we abrogate our responsibilities and consign, our descendants to a nightmare world. And this is a book that puts in front of ourselves, all the grandparents and the parents who are going to have their children on their knee, or they're going to, buy this book for their kids or their grandkids, as an instance of what there is to celebrate and what there is to defend.
Cheers, mate. Well, you might remember, we don't go out before talking about music. What did you listen to coming down, or sort of what's in the ears generally these days?
There was a great American kind of roots singer-songwriter called Chris Whitley, who I was seriously into years ago, and in fact we featured him on the album that we made for Dirt Music when Lucky Oceans and I were producing that album that came out after my novel in 2001.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard of, and Chris Whitley's since died, sadly. He died, in his mid-40s. And I was listening to his first great album, Living with the Law, as I prepared to come down, and it's a great record. Got a lot of terrific songs on it. So, yeah, I recommend having a look at Chris Whitley. And somebody told me there's a documentary about him called Dirt Floor on YouTube, so it might be worth a look.
I can always rely on you for a tip I haven't had before. Thanks, Tim. On you, mate.
Pleasure.
That was adored Aussie writer Tim Winton, with great thanks to you generous supporting listeners for making it possible. Special thanks this week to Andrew Carter and Jennifer Lowe for becoming new subscribers. And for subscribers notching up their 3rd anniversary, thanks so much to Gillian Sandbrook, Martin Vanderwalt, Anne Goodall, and Terry and Pam McCosker. And Fiona Brooke, thanks so much for your 4 years of support. Just incredible, one and all. If you'd like to join us, be part of a great community, get some exclusive stuff, and help keep the show going, we'd love you too. Just head to the website or the show notes and follow the prompts. Ningaloo, Australia's Wild Wonder, will be launched in Perth tonight. The book can be pre-ordered now and will be in stores from the first week of October. And if you happen to feel like hearing more of Tim and I in conversation, head to episode 162 on the extraordinary documentary about Ningaloo that Tim spearheaded a couple of years ago, and even episode 17 way back in the beginning, just after the launch of the feature film adapted from his book, Breath. And quick tip, last week's stack of events here in WA delivered in spades. I'll have more for you on all that soon. For now, the music you're hearing is Regeneration by Amelia Barden. My name's Anthony James. Thanks for listening.